They used to call me just a medic, said I was wasting my life, chasing dust and danger while my brother built a career they could brag about. Funny how none of them knew what I really did, or who I became. Not until the president called my name. And by then, it was too late. This story isn't about revenge, it's about truth. About how sometimes the people closest to you see the least, and how you don't need their permission to be extraordinary. If you're ready to hear it, I'll tell you everything. But first, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment. This channel shares stories of ordinary people with not so ordinary lives. And trust me, this one will stay with you. My name is Amber James, and I was born in Austin, Texas, 29 years ago on a rainy Tuesday morning. I'm the second child in a family where first place was already taken, permanently. My brother Nathan is 32, a polished attorney with a Harvard degree, a seat in the state Senate, and a smile that could sell lies for a living. And in our house, he was always the sun we all orbited around. Our parents, Robert and Evelyn James, were the kind of people who believed in clean reputations, legacy dinners, and the power of introductions. My father's office shelves were lined with leather-bound case law volumes, and our family photos looked like political campaign material. We were never loud, we were never messy, we were ideal. On paper. But I was the misprint. They say some people are born to follow the family script. I wasn't. I liked the mess. I liked being in motion, pushing myself. Not just thinking, but doing. And in a family where ambition meant courtrooms and cocktail receptions, my dreams looked more like desserts, helicopters, and open wounds. They didn't understand. Maybe they never wanted to. I still remember the conversation the day I told them I was enlisting in the Air Force, not to sit behind a desk, not in intelligence or strategy. I told them I was going into pararescue, APJ, as we're called. The elite of the elite. Combat medics trained to jump from the sky and run into chaos when everyone else runs away. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His silence did it louder. That's noble, he finally said, like I'd announced I was becoming a volunteer crossing guard. My mother looked at the floor. Nathan smiled politely, like he was humoring a child who said they wanted to be a pirate. I still remember the taste in my mouth that night. It wasn't doubt. It was something harder, like chewing on steel. The training was brutal. Most people quit. Bones break. Minds crack. But I made it through. I bled through it. I buried parts of myself in those months and replaced them with something stronger. I learned to treat trauma under fire, to rappel into burning forests, to hold someone's life in my hands while bullets snapped overhead. I saw death so many times I stopped flinching, and I saved lives, quietly, without fanfare. And through it all, they never once asked what I did. Never called after my missions. Never even showed up the day I received my first commendation. It clashed with Nathan's fundraiser, I think. To them, I was still just a medic. Cute, reckless Amber, always chasing adrenaline, always trying to be special. But there were moments, like the one in Kandahar, or the mountains outside Taji, moments I can't talk about. Not yet. Not fully. Moments that changed everything. Not that they would have asked. Not that they'd care. You might be wondering, why did she stay? Why keep serving if no one sees her? And the answer is, because someone had to. But something was coming. Something I didn't expect. It all started with a letter. An invitation to a political evening gala in D.C., with military honors. One of those events where politicians clap for troops they've never met, drink champagne, and whisper re-election strategies over shrimp cocktail. Normally, I would have declined, but something told me to go. Maybe I wanted to see if anyone would notice me in a room full of power. Maybe I was finally ready to step into the light. Or maybe, deep down, I wanted them to see what I had become. Not for revenge, not for closure, but for truth. I wore my dress blues to the gala, sharp lines, crisp collar, medals resting quietly above my heart. The fabric always felt heavy, not from the weight, but from the memories sewn into the seams. Every thread a mission, every stripe a scar you couldn't see. The hotel was marble and glass, glittering like it had something to prove. Outside, cameras flashed at men in tuxedos and women in gowns that looked more expensive than my entire career. My boots tapped against the polished floor like they didn't belong. I walked past senators and generals, past businessmen with sculpted smiles and eyes like cold coin flips. Everyone talking, but no one really listening. I stood out, and not in a good way. There were other uniforms there, but they stood in groups. I stood alone. Then someone said my name. Sergeant James? I turned. A man in a dark suit approached me. He was older, calm, with the kind of posture that said, "I've been watching before you even noticed." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, the president would like a moment of your time." I blinked. I thought maybe I misheard him. "I'm sorry?" He didn't repeat himself, just gestured for me to follow. There was a strange kind of hush in the hallway we stepped into, like sound itself had been told to behave. We moved past security, past curious glances, into a side room with tall windows and closed doors. And there he was, the President of the United States. Not the image from TV, not the speech-giving, crowd-shaking version, just a man standing by a table, holding a glass of water with both hands, like he needed a second. He looked up at me, smiled, walked over. "I thought you'd be taller," he said, half joking, "but I suppose legends rarely match the file size." I didn't know what to say. I managed something that resembled a salute, and he waved it off. "No need for that in here. Just you and me." There was silence for a moment, and then he said it. "Operation Black Dagger." The name hit me like a memory someone had buried in cement. "You were the PJ who went in first." My throat tightened. "That mission is classified," I said quietly. He nodded. "It is, and it will remain that way. But people in this room tonight owe their lives to what you did, including someone very close to me." I stared at him, the weight of it all suddenly pressing against my chest. The faces, the heat, the gunfire, the blood, and the sound of a voice I'd almost forgotten, whispering, "Please don't leave me." He stepped closer. His voice dropped. "I read every report. Your name appeared more times than I can count. You patched 3 others while under fire, dragged an unconscious man 300 meters under hostile surveillance, and called in air support with a radio half crushed under your body weight. And you were 26 years old." I didn't remember it that way. I remembered sand in my teeth and the fear of doing something wrong. I remembered hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I remembered a boy's voice on the other end of the comms screaming for his mother. "You didn't just save lives," the president said. "You altered the course of something far bigger." He turned to the desk, picked up a black box. "When was the last time your family saw you in uniform?" I laughed once. Dry. "I don't think they ever looked." He paused. "Would they come, if they were invited to something historic?" I swallowed. My mouth had gone dry. "Maybe, if they knew it mattered." He held out the box. Inside it, cushioned in blue velvet, was a silver cross, delicate and unassuming, but I knew what it meant. The Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. He closed the lid. "I'd like you to accept this, Sergeant. At the White House. Full honors. Press, cabinet, international delegation, and I'd like your family to be there. They deserve to know what they missed." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was already elsewhere, back in Austin, imagining my mother's carefully painted expression, my father's half-hearted handshake, Nathan's polite applause as if he were sitting through a play he didn't choose. Would they come? Would they understand? Did I even care anymore? Still, I nodded. Send the invitation. Let's find out. The White House doesn't feel real until you're inside it. From the outside, it's history carved in stone. But once you're walking through the corridors, with polished wood beneath your shoes, and portraits watching your every step, it feels like stepping inside a memory that doesn't belong to you. They seated me near the front. Third row, directly across from the podium where the president would speak. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. Not because of the medal, not because of the cameras, but because I knew they were here. My family. I hadn't seen them yet. But I knew they were somewhere in this room, probably near the middle. Good view, just far enough to seem humble, just close enough to be seen. Would they recognize me in full uniform? Would they feel anything? The ceremony began with orchestral precision. The press whispered in corners. Diplomatic figures adjusted their ties. Medals were awarded one by one to soldiers and airmen with stories etched across their faces. Each name called was a life lived in shadows, seen now for the first time. Then, I heard mine. Sergeant Amber Noel James. The president's voice rang out clearly. I stood. My knees were steadier than I expected. The walk to the stage felt longer than any deployment. I could feel 100 eyes on me, and 4 I was searching for. When I reached the podium, the president didn't rush. He looked at me, then turned to the room. Sometimes, courage looks like storming a battlefield, he began, and sometimes it looks like carrying another person's life on your back through darkness. He let the words settle. Sergeant James is a pararescue man in the United States Air Force. She doesn't talk about what she does. She doesn't have to. Her actions speak louder than the silence she's endured. He paused, looked at the crowd. Operation Black Dagger was classified. Parts of it still are. But today, I'm authorized to share just one piece. And then he told them. He told them about the mission, how an intelligence team had been compromised deep in hostile territory, their location discovered, their extraction window vanishing by the second. He told them how a single medic dropped into chaos without air cover, crossed open terrain while under fire, and stabilized a bleeding agent with only what she could carry on her back. He told them how that same medic took a bullet through the shoulder and still stayed on her feet. Radioed in coordinates, fought to keep the evac zone clear, and refused to be pulled out until the last man was on board. And then, he looked back at me. She never asked for recognition. But today, this country gives it to her. He opened the box. As he pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on my chest, the silence was deafening. Not the kind that feels empty, the kind that's thick with realization. I turned my head, slowly, scanning the crowd. And there they were. My mother, eyes wide, hands in her lap like she didn't know what to do with them. My father, expression frozen in a grimace that didn't know if it was pride or panic. And Nathan, my brother, mouth slightly parted, brows tight, like he was seeing someone he'd never actually known. For the first time in my life, they didn't know how to look at me. Not like a daughter, not like a sister, just someone they couldn't explain anymore. After the ceremony, there was applause. Shaking hands, smiling officials, cameras I didn't look into. People congratulating me for things they would never understand. And then came the hallway. Quiet, off to the side. And there they were, my family, waiting. No hugs, no tears, just tension. My father spoke first. That was quite a surprise. I smiled politely. It was classified. Nathan chuckled awkwardly. Guess you've been busy. I looked at him. Guess so. My mother blinked like she wanted to say something but didn't have the right script. Instead, she asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" I tilted my head. Would you have listened? Silence. There it was again, that wall between us, old and unspoken, made not of anger but misunderstanding. A life unlived in front of them. They said the things people say in these moments. We're proud of you. We didn't realize. You've grown so much. None of it felt dishonest, but none of it felt earned. I didn't say much back. I didn't need to. I just smiled and said, I was just doing my job. And that was it. No big scene, no apology. Just the moment they realized they never really knew who I was. And now, it was too late to catch up. I walked away before the silence could grow teeth. The medal sat in a drawer for weeks after the ceremony. I didn't display it. Didn't post about it. It felt strange holding something so heavy for something I never wanted recognition for. Honor isn't found in a box. It's found in the way you show up, over and over, when no one's watching. My family returned to Texas the next morning. There were polite words exchanged at the hotel lobby, a quick photo I didn't ask for, and then they were gone. The next time I saw my father was on TV. Nathan gave a speech about patriotism the following month. Neither mentioned me. A few weeks later, my cousin Mallory sent a photo from one of their garden parties. There it was, my medal, in a display case on a side table like it was part of the decor, next to the antique globe and my brother's law school diploma. My father had become proud of me in the most impersonal way possible, by turning me into an anecdote. But I didn't feel anger, not anymore. Something had shifted that night in the White House, not just in them, but in me. I no longer needed them to see me. I had seen myself. And that changed everything. I declined the next deployment. Not because I was done, but because I wanted to give back differently. I applied for a permanent assignment at the pararescue school in New Mexico, a place where the toughest minds and bodies are broken down, reshaped, and reforged into something rare, something necessary. When I arrived, it was still dark. The desert was cold in the mornings. I stood in the sand as the sun started to rise, that wide, burning stretch of sky that feels like the beginning of the world. Behind me, a row of fresh recruits, wide-eyed and scared and pretending not to be. Kids. Some of them, brave. Most of them, lost. All of them. For now. I introduced myself simply. Sergeant James, I'm here to train you. I'm not your enemy. But I won't let you lie to yourselves. Out there, that gets people killed. In here, it's how we learn to survive. They stood straighter. Something shifted in their posture, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because life was easy, but because it was true. Days turned into weeks. I spent my mornings running drills and my nights walking the halls, checking in on students who looked too tired to speak. I showed them how to stop bleeding with one hand, how to keep breathing when panic claws up your throat. I told them things no one had told me when I started, like how the worst wounds are the ones you never get medals for. I didn't talk much about the mission, or the medal, or the White House, but word got around, and one night, one of the newer recruits, a quiet girl from Montana who reminded me too much of myself, knocked on my office door. She stood awkwardly, helmet under one arm. "Is it true?" she asked. "That you saved a CIA agent in Black Dagger?" I leaned back in my chair, smiled just a little. "Is it true," I said, "that you ran 6 miles today on a busted ankle and didn't tell anyone?" Her cheeks flushed. We stared at each other for a moment, and I saw it again, that look of someone trying to prove they belong. I nodded toward the chair. "Come in. Let me tell you a story." These days, I don't look back very often, but sometimes, at night, I'll hear from one of my students, a call from somewhere across the world. They'll whisper, "I made it out," or "We saved him," or just, "Thank you." I keep those messages in a notebook in my locker. No medals, no headlines, just ink and memory. As for my family, we talk once or twice a year. Holidays, usually. My father still doesn't understand why I never sent the medal back home. What he doesn't realize is, he never had it. Not really. It wasn't for the display case. It wasn't for him. It wasn't even for me. It was for every person I knelt beside in the dark. Every heartbeat I held in my hands. Every time I stayed when I wanted to run. That medal belongs to those moments, and they don't live in Texas. They live in the desert wind and the screams in the night, and the silence after a life is saved. So if you ever ask me who I am, I won't tell you about the ceremony. I'll just say this. I did my job, and I kept going. That's all I ever wanted. And now, that's more than enough.